Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, my friends, Big Paul here with you today for another Anabolic Q&A in my sling in recovery mode over here from my bicep tendon and labrum repair, getting back into the swing of things. Hopefully it all makes sense. Thank God there's no painkillers on deck because I do not tolerate painkillers well, so I should be cogent and coherent for this Q&A. I got a lot of good questions lined up today. I've got one about SHBG and its role in libido and testosterone levels. Why people go hypo on contest prep. We'll talk about some reasons that could be behind that. My thoughts on subcutaneous microdosing of testosterone. What supplements are essential for gym bro bodybuilders? Now we're talking about just over-the-counter stuff here. And I've got some other stuff lined up. Before we get into all that, I just want to let you guys know that I have a 20% off sale going on the Science of Anabolics and PEDZ course right now. You can use the discount code SPRING at checkout to get 20% off. The sale goes on until next Tuesday. First week of May. So if you want to pick up the e-course, now's the time to do it. 20% off. Also, all the questions from this Q&A are from my Team Anabolic Bodybuilding members only school site. Over on the Team Anabolic Bodybuilding member site, I answer your questions. So if you have questions for me specifically, I answer them one-on-one. It's a cheap $30 a month if you want to ask questions. And I pull questions for this Q&A from that member site. Link is in the video description below if you want to join up. I have a group of about 100 people over there now. Pretty solid group of people that help each other out, and we ask questions. There's also some mini courses in there as well on insulin use, cycle design, other stuff in there that it comes along with it for free as well. Anyway, enough of that stuff, folks, and we're going to dig into all the questions in just 1 second. All right, first question I've got up here is from Matt. Matt asks, is there a reason why going hypo during contest prep is more common? Is it all related to insulin sensitivity? If so, what are some tricks to solve the problems? Yeah, there is a multitude of reasons why it will happen on contest prep, and it seems to be more prevalent towards the end of contest prep. There's a multitude of things going on that are contributing to this. Some of it's the drugs. You guys are, especially now, people are taking GLP-1s to help with dieting. I know some people use metformin and things like that for appetite control, berberine, some other supplements that are, over-the-counter supplement that would be contributing to insulin sensitivity. There is some evidence in animal studies that clenbuterol also improves GLUT4 transport, which would lower glucose levels in the blood and increase glucose uptake into the muscle as well. Tren, as far as I know, I couldn't find any studies directly linking Tren to insulin sensitivity. Everybody who's ever taken Tren knows that Tren can make you fucking go hypo. I've had many experiences with Tren making me hypo. I've seen it happen with people that I've coached where Tren contributes to going hypoglycemic. It seems to have some effect on insulin sensitivity. You can actually see glucose levels if you have a CGM, like I do here. If you have a CGM, you can actually see your glucose levels decline when you're using Trenbolone. Now, there's just the physiological effects of just getting leaner. If we think about it, like when we get exotically lean for contest prep, your body needs energy to run. So there's a couple substrates that your body's going to run on when it comes to energy production. Glucose primarily is its first choice for energy. Keto bros, carnivore bros, I'm sorry to tell you that, but the body does prefer to run on glucose. It's not to say that it can't run on fats. It certainly can, and that's what we do in a contest prep. We're metabolizing fat for fat burning to reduce fat stores. Fat is sort of our emergency reserve for energy. Think about it that way. Glucose is ready, available, easy to produce energy. Now, what will happen when you get super lean and you're using a low carbohydrate diet, you might get to a point where your body fat is so low that there's not a lot of readily accessible fat for energy. And also, if you're in a state where you're glycogen depleted, your body, where muscle and liver glycogen is completely depleted from running a low carbohydrate diet, you're at this point deep in the contest prep. What is left for energy? There's nothing left, really. And so what happens in that situation, a lot of times guys will get hypo. They go periodically hypo throughout the day because your body is nuking whatever glucose is left. There's no, the liver a lot of times will be the emergency store for glucose. Your liver glycogen will be there, glucagon and other metabolic effects that happen that cause release of liver glycogen to keep you from going hypo. All of that is completely wiped out when you're deep into contest prep and your body doesn't really have much fat left to burn for energy as well. So what ends up happening in a situation like that, a lot of times you end up going into gluconeogenesis. Your body will start converting protein structures into glucose to keep you from dying. And it's not a very efficient process. And if you're in a situation where you're lifting weights, which are glucose intensive activity, if you're doing heavy strength exercises and there's no glucose available and gluconeogenesis can't be, it can't happen quick enough to deliver the substrate of energy needed for that exercise or that activity, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to go hypo. You'll see it most of the time when dudes go hypo, when they're on contest prep, it is, or deep into a diet when they're super lean, and when they're lifting weights, that's when you tend to go hypo. Now, if you're just a regular person walking around, living your life, your body will go into gluconeogenesis and start converting protein structures, amino acids, into glucose, and that's enough to keep you from dying. I think bare minimum for metabolic, for central nervous system, your kidney, your brain to function, you need something like 50 to 60 grams of glucose present throughout the day, roughly. Ideally, it should be around 150 grams of carbs per day is sort of like, kind of like where you get below that, you start breaking into ketosis and things like that. But if you're exotically lean, all of these things are just thrown out the window. There's no emergency reserves left, and your body starts having to resort to desperate measures for making glucose, which is gluconeogenesis. And you can tell when you're in gluconeogenesis, I've talked about this before, you'll start to smell like ammonia. Ammonia is a byproduct of breaking down protein structures into glucose. So that's a dead giveaway. You'll see the guy, at basketball practice or at a hard MMA practice or, dude at the end of contest prep that smells like straight up ammonia. That's what's going on there. But anyway, long story short, there's really just no energy left. Your body you're doing glucose intensive activities. This is why I still like stacking carbohydrates around the workout in a pre-contest state. Now, occasionally some guys are just stubborn at fat loss and you have to pull all the carbs out. That happens. But in an ideal world, we want to leave some carbohydrates around the workout window and some sort of glucose drink, or highly branched cyclic dextrin, whatever during the intra workout. You don't need a ton. 20 grams, 25 grams of glucose is usually enough to get you through the workout without going hypo, and then just a little bit post workout. If you do that, most of the time you can avoid that going hypo at the end. It's when you pull all the carbs out, it's when you get yourself in trouble and you're lifting weights. Next question here is from my coaching client, Ed Potranko. Ed has a really good question here. For an average gym bro, not a genetic gifted freak of nature, assuming he is 8 to 12% body fat, has a good work ethic, and very disciplined, what is a reasonable amount of muscle tissue, real contractile tissue, not fat, water, etc., he can put on with a well-structured cycle? What compounds would you use in a clean diet designed to add muscle? How much do you think he could add in a year? We have real world examples of this. We can look at things. There's a ton of different variables, but let's assume that your body composition is in a good place. You have average genetics. You are training hard. You've got your diet buttoned up. It's muscle gain is not linear. What I have seen, there's these breakthroughs in muscle gain. It doesn't really matter how old you are. When you first start lifting weights, you don't even have to be on a diet or taking PEDs. That first year, you're going to gain muscle. Then you hit the wall and it just kind of stops. Then dudes sort of figure out, well, I need to dial in my training. And then they have another breakthrough where they gain a few more pounds of muscle. And then eventually dudes will end up finding PEDs, and you have that first ride when you take PEDs, and you might have like a 5-10 pound gain when you first start PEDs, but then that stops. And then dudes figure out, it seems like the last piece of the puzzle they figure out, they do it in exact wrong order. It's like, well, shit, I need to get my diet buttoned up. I need to get my diet dialed in. They do that, and then they'll have another little breakthrough. So it's not linear. Usually you have these initial gains, and then things level off, but once you reach that intermediate level of lifting, I say once you have 4 to 5 years in the gym, you've already ventured down the path of PEDs, you've already got your diet buttoned up. I would call that the intermediate level of lifting. Very few people ever make it to the advanced level, which would be pro bodybuilder level status of muscle density, muscle accumulation, of hypertrophy. Just a small percentage of people actually ever make it there. It's sort of like being a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Very few people ever accomplish that. For most intermediate people, I would say a couple pounds a year, even on PEDs, something like 2 to 5 pounds a year. And I know that sounds depressing. It comes in spurts, though. Here's the thing. You will do a mass phase. A lot of times guys will do a mass phase. They'll do a 16 to 20 week mass phase, usually one per year. Is what it works out, and then you have to do some sort of cut afterwards. You might put on 10, 15 pounds of actual weight during that cut, or during that bulk, sorry. And then after you cut and you work your way down, you might come away with like 4 or 5 pounds of real contractile tissue. And a lot of guys get really disappointed with that. It's crazy to me because guys give up too easily. They see that 4 or 5 pounds of muscle gained in a year, and they're like, fuck, this sucks. I'm not doing this anymore. This is a waste of time. My coach sucks. I don't have what it takes to do this. But think about this. If you put on just 4 pounds a year over a 10-year period of time, that's 40 pounds of muscle tissue in a 10-year period of time. You'll be the biggest dude in your gym. You'll be competing for a pro card likely if you added 40 pounds of real contractile tissue to your body. It is a slow ass grind getting big. And we have real world examples of what the best possible outcome could be. We can look at a guy like Nick Walker. I've used this example a million times. Nick probably had one of the most impressive muscle gains in a 10 years span of time that I have ever seen. Nick put on about 100 pounds of muscle over a 10-year period of time from when he first started lifting up until he turned pro. And let's do the math on that. That's 10 pounds per year of real tissue gain, and that works out to be less than 1 pound a month. It's about 0.8 pounds per month of muscle that he gained, 0.2 pounds per week of muscle that he gained, and that is the absolute best case scenario that you could possibly have. There's nothing better than what he did. That is the outlier genetic freak. Now, granted, it wasn't linear. He probably gained 20 pounds his first year, then 15, then 10, then 8, then 5, then 4, then 3, and it usually goes something like that. As you get more advanced, you have to eke out the gains even slower and even slower, and then you eventually get to a point where you just start maintaining. You're not going to add more size. You just kind of cap out your genetics and where you can go to. And that's where you'll see like guys that are peak when they're pros. But so long story short, I mean, think about it this way. This is what I always tell my clients when they get disappointed. Go to the grocery store, put 4 pounds of steak in your grocery cart, and look at how much meat that actually is. And think about adding that to your body. 4 pounds is going to significantly change how you look. And I think bodybuilding is the ultimate test of patience, of persistence. It is a very much a delayed gratification activity endeavor. It's not, if you are a person that needs immediate feedback and results, you're not going to get it from bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is one of those things that you have to commit to for a long fucking time and be willing to just grind your ass into the ground and never give up. And eventually you get there. I did jiu-jitsu for years, and I love the analogy that the old school Brazilian guys have. They said, I remember the guy that taught at the jiu-jitsu academy I was at, and I'm not trying to say I'm some jiu-jitsu expert. I'm a very mediocre jiu-jitsu guy. I'd like to get back to it at some point. But I remember him saying that a black belt is just a white belt that kept coming to class for 15 years. That's really the difference between a white and a black belt. The black belt is the guy that just came to class 4 or 5 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever it was, and did it for 15 years. Battled through some injuries, had some hardship along the way, just kept showing up, and eventually he got his black belt. Bodybuilding is the same way. If you're consistent with your diet, if you're consistent with your food, if you're consistent with using your PEDs, that's another part of the question I didn't touch on. For PEDs, for growing and sustaining this, you have to think long term. You have to think long term when it comes to your PED use. This is another area where guys get completely impatient, is they try to blast everything and take all the wrong shit, and then they make themselves sick, and they can't continue to go after it. You have to be able to sustain this for a very long period of time. So you want to design your cycles in something that's going to be sustainable, that you can do for a 10-year stretch of time without getting sick, so you can accumulate that sort of size that you want to put on. I think that's another mistake guys make, is getting extremely impatient with these cycles and try to shortcut things. You have to think long term. If you get sick, if you can't take PEDs anymore, you're not going to continue to grow. So the whole, don't get me wrong, there are times where you want to be aggressive and you want to press things, but you pick and choose those spots. Those are here and there. It's not something you're going to do 365 days a year. Anyway, long story short, got to be patient with bodybuilding and putting on muscle. It's a very slow process. The best in the planet averaged 10 pounds per year, so keep that in mind when you're only gaining 4 and you're or 3 or 4 or whatever, and you're disappointed with those results. The best dude on the planet, the most genetically gifted guy on the planet, only averaged 10 pounds per year. All right, next question here is from Mr. Anonymous. What role does SHBG play in libido, if any? And everybody seems to be obsessed with SHBG lately. This is one of those things. I figure Steve has some really good stuff on it. If you want to go down the rabbit hole of SHBG, it's funny because I remember in the early 2000s when I was on the bodybuilding message forums and talking to bros, and everybody was like, get your SHBG as low as you possibly can so your free testosterone's high and you can grow. And now everybody's worried about their SHBG being too low. It used to be the exact opposite. So let's unpack this a little bit and talk about what SHBG actually is. It is a glycoprotein produced by the liver whose job is to bind up sex hormones. Basically, it's sort of like the regulator, the throttle control on your hormones to make sure that there's not too much being put into use. And you're talking about things like testosterone, DHT, estrogen, sex hormones. It binds to those sex hormones. It renders them unusable by the receptor until that binding protein is gone. So it's essentially the governor for your hormones. Now, when we're blasting steroids and you have a lot going on, more specifically, it seems to be the DHT-derived steroids, there's not enough SHBG to keep up with all the steroids that you're getting in there, and you end up with low SHBG, and you basically just overwhelm the SHBG. And then you end up in a situation where you have a bunch of unbound free sex hormones. So you'll see it when guys have low SHBG, their free testosterone will increase, which in theory, if you're trying to grow, is probably productive for growth. But paradoxically, here's the problem that you run into when SHBG gets low and all of these sex hormones are floating around free. It seems to be in men that it can fuck up your libido. you would think more testosterone is going to equal more libido, but it also is a balance of hormones. There's a balance of testosterone, DHT, and estradiol for proper libido and sexual function. And a lot of times what I'll see is when guys have low SHBG, high free testosterone, they also have high estradiol along with it too. And there's this cult of dudes now that think that having high estrogen is the way to go. And you end up with a situation where your dick doesn't work. You have high estrogen, granted your IGF-1 is going to be high, but if you care about boners, then cool, you got high IGF-1, but your girlfriend was going to be disappointed with your limp eggplant. So that can also be an issue. Usually when I see estrogen too high, the sex drive is decent. You'll have good sex drive, and then soft erections, water retention, a bunch of other issues. There's the opposite problem too. Dudes will smash the Prima Bowl and an EQ and then end up lowering their estrogen to nothing, and then you end up having no sex drive at all. Sex drive is it's a very difficult tango. Honestly, I find that mine is the best when I keep my testosterone in a relatively low, like 300 milligrams a week, is somewhere around that range, 250, 300 milligrams a week. And then I throw in a DHT-derived steroid on top of it, probably because my estrogen gets too high sometimes, although I've had it crushed in the past. But Masteron's great for sex drive. Proviron's great for sex drive. But I do think guys get a little too obsessed with SHBG. If you're going to be running super physiological doses of gear, you're trying to be an advanced bodybuilder, you're trying to grow, your SHBG is just going to be smashed. There's nothing you can do about it. It really, there are some drugs that seem to help SHBG. I think I've seen studies showing that tamoxifen can raise SHBG. There's some other stuff that you can play around with that they can do. But ultimately, the best way to get it up is just to come back down to a very low dose testosterone. And then eventually it'll come back up if you're concerned about that. But if you're a dummy bodybuilder, it's just kind of the cost of doing business. If you're a TRT, just feel good guy, just running less gear is really the answer for keeping your SHBG in check. There's trade-offs either way. I personally have never really obsessed about SHBG. I know some guys do, but my goal has always been to just get jacked. And I've never really had massive issues with sex drive unless sex drive and erectile function. Usually when I see sex drive and erection issues in men, it is more a function of estrogen is out of balance. There's something going on with estrogen. Either it's too high or too low, or prolactin is out of whack, although I don't see prolactin a lot. Or guys are running 19 Nors fuck you all up, synthetic progestins, you end up having anxiety and a bunch of other issues, and then you can't come, and you got your eggplant is a very soft, mushy eggplant, which no lady likes. So that's the trade-off of taking 19 Nors. I guess at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, is being jacked more important to you, or is having a great sex drive and feeling great more important to you? It's hard to really balance the two. All right, next question here I got is from Alexander Alfonso. He goes, I just dieted down to single-digit body fat from a dirty bulk. Shame on you for doing the dirty bulk, Alexander. Have you learned nothing from me? And was planning on cruising for 2 months, then adding Tren to continue dieting down to show leanness. How would you structure the diet break? Well, I'm going to give you a little lecture, Alexander. If you hadn't done that dirty bulk, you wouldn't need to diet down more. You wouldn't need a diet break to diet down even more. You would be in a good body fat percentage. So learn the lesson there. Keep yourself lean. I have a rule of thumb when it comes to body fat percentage. If you can't see the outline of your abs, you gotten too fat. You need to rope it in. That's when your off season ends and you need to pull it back. I would say percentage-wise, the top end is about 15% body fat, or where I like to let people get. I also wouldn't go and just throw Tren in to kind of speed the process along. Tren to me doesn't really shine until you're down around single digit body fat. You get yourself down to around 10% and you want to get stage lean. That's the time to throw Tren at it. Tren does have some benefits there. I just wouldn't arbitrarily throw Tren in because you did a dirty bulk and now you're regretting your dirty bulk. Just do it the old fashioned way. Diet down, do some cardio, eat a calorie deficit. You know, there's a bunch of different things you can do with your food. Eventually you can layer in some fat burners or metabolic aids. You can potentially put in a GLP-1 or some SLU or clenbuterol once you hit the wall. But with the fat loss, what I like to do is I hate this like mini cut diet break thing. Just fucking go balls to the wall and get yourself lean. Get yourself down to, 10, 12% body fat. That's a decent spot for most guys to be. As far as diet breaks go, what I usually find is that the wheels start to fall off after being in a hard deficit at around 16 weeks. Sometimes you can stretch it out to 20. What I like to do is kind of take guys back up to their pre-diet calories. I run carb cycling, so I'll have one high day per week. For a refeed day, I'll have the medium days, which will probably be isocaloric. Those days will be at maintenance, and then I'll keep the low day, 1 to 2 low days in per week when I'm on the diet break, which are going to be in a slight deficit. What I'll do I'll take that diet break. If you've gotten so fat you need 2 diet phases, you can't get it all off in one phase, which does happen. I have plenty of situations, if realistically, you can lose 1 to 2 pounds of fat a week. So if you're doing a 16-week diet, you're talking about 20 to 25 pounds, 30 on the top side of amount of fat that you can lose during that time period. So if you've got more than 20, 25 pounds of fat that you need to lose, you definitely are going to need to do it in 2 phases, unless you're willing to sacrifice some muscle and go more aggressive with the deficit. But if you don't want to sacrifice muscle, 1 to 2 pounds a week is sort of a realistic rate of weight loss. But I would program in the diet break. I would do it about 4 or 5 weeks after that 16 weeks. And I'll slowly ratchet the calories up. What I'll do is watch the scale. You're going to get an initial jump on the scale when you put some food back in because of glycogen synthesis. But then if it levels out, I'll slowly add in a little more carbs during the diet break just to see if I can get the metabolism up a little bit. And I'll pull cardio back down during that diet break as well. I like to get guys back down. After a while, your body just sensitizes to the cardio too, and it stops being effective. I give guys a break during the cardio, so I'll pull it back down to 20 minutes per session during a diet break, and then we'll start ratcheting back up when we go back into a diet phase. Scott Brinkman from the Anabolic Bodybuilding School member site has a question. He asks, there are so many supplement choices in the world of bodybuilding. If you're an old man competitive bodybuilder, which ones do you consider essential, especially if you're on a strict budget and want to be able to afford Serostim? I love that. Just save your money and buy the blue tops. If not, I'm not taking gear. I'm asking about supplements like fish oil, creatine. Talking about gear, I'm talking about regular over-the-counter supplements, fish oil, creatine, citrus bergamot, etc. If you wanted to spend the absolute least, what stuff would you consider essential? I think most guys, and I've been guilty of this myself, really overbuy supplements, and a lot of supplements don't do a whole lot. Really, the bang for the buck is really not that great. What I consider essential, the stuff that I would talk about would be essential things like I look at blood panels and I see problems with all the time. Most people vastly overeat saturated fats and do not get in enough EFAs, specifically DHA and EPA. So I would have some sort of essential fatty acid supplement. Fish oil is the most commonly used one. Get a cold pressed salmon fish oil. I make sure it's something that doesn't have mercury or krill oil, whatever you want to do, or an omega-3 pack, whatever you want. But I would start there. I would say fish oil is an essential one for heart, brain, cardiovascular health. I would also say vitamin D. Most people that I see when we pull blood panels are vitamin D deficient and K2. That is definitely something I see quite frequently in people, vitamin D and K2 deficiency. Most men, when they get their B12 checked, are B12 deficient. Now, here's the problem with over-the-counter B12 vitamins. They are not very well absorbed through the GI. A lot of times, if you're going to do B12, you have to do injectable B12 to get any effect from it. But I would check blood work to see if B12 is necessary. Magnesium, most people are deficient in magnesium as well. Zinc, vitamin C, those are some other ones. A lot of times just a good whole food multivitamin will cover a lot of this stuff. I use the Thorn brand multivitamin. I like Thorn stuff. Whatever you prefer is get that. You can cover a lot of the stuff. But I would say those are sort of the baseline essentials. Now, stuff that other bros like to take that may or may not help. Creatine is one that guys seem to love. I have personally never used creatine. I might be the only bro bodybuilder that's never used it. I don't know. I just have never, I don't know. I feel like it makes me a water bag. I end up getting bloated, and it also seems to upset my stomach, so I just don't use creatine. I've gotten plenty big without using creatine, but dudes seem to love creatine and say that it actually has an effect in the gym. But outside of that, we can go down the rabbit hole of other food supplements and stuff. But I would say those are the essential things that you need to have. Good multivitamin, vitamin D with K2 specifically for calcium metabolism. You need vitamin D with K2, vitamin C, magnesium, fish oil, potentially B12 shots, potentially. It depends on where you're at. But I would say those are sort of the essential bare minimum ones that I would put in on a plan. All right, next question is from Stay in Your Lane. What are your opinions on subcutaneous micro dosing of testosterone daily? 20 to 50 milligrams SubQ daily. I've never done this, but I've seen this method gaining a lot of traction, especially for cruise doses. I'd like to shed some light on this topic, wanting to know about the efficacy of daily subcutaneous compared to twice a week intramuscular injections. Here's the thing with the subcutaneous thing. I've kind of come full circle on this. You can look at it. You do get more stable levels if you are doing daily injections. The drug itself was designed to be administered intramuscularly, and it's the depot that gets absorbed over a period of time intramuscularly. The thing I worry about with subcutaneous injections and what I've seen is that a lot of times you get skin irritation, that oil disperses weirdly. I've seen dudes have problems with it subcutaneously. You certainly can take it subcutaneously. I've seen studies showing that there's not a huge difference in absorption rates subcutaneously. I would say this, though. If you're going to do subcutaneous daily administration, you need to be small doses like the 20-unit dose or 10 to 20-unit dose. If you get much more than that, if we're talking about big volume of injections, like 1 cc or more, you're not going to be able to do that subcutaneously. Now, here's my thing. When I'm on cruise, it's just a psychological thing. Yes, there are some advantages from doing more frequent injections. You're going to get more stable hormone levels, especially if you have problems with estradiol or DHT conversion. It seems that, more specifically, estradiol conversion. If you take a bigger bolus dose, it seems to be there's a spike in estradiol conversion, whereas if you take a daily microdose, it doesn't seem to have that. But honestly, I get tired of taking fucking shots. I just don't want to take shots anymore. When I'm coming off blast, because a lot of times I'm taking shots every day, every other day, large volumes of shots, I just get tired. So I go back to once or twice a week shots. I seem to be fine with it. I used to be like, just subcutaneously administer it every other day. It's just a lot more work. It's more needles. And I don't know how much of a benefit that you get out of it truly after trying it both ways. I've kind of come full circle on this. I have some older videos up where I was advocating for the microdosing daily. I would say this. If you have issues with estrogen conversion, it can help with that. I've seen guys go to the daily administration and not need an AI where they would have needed an AI before. I will say this, the subcutaneous administration thing is mostly just a thing that I think TRT doctors came up with because dudes are pussies and don't want to do big needles and IM shots. Look, just put on your big boy pants, take the big shot. It's up to you though. But certainly if you can do subcutaneous injections if you're doing smaller dosing, but that's just a new thing that's been around for the last couple of years. I don't know that there's any specific advantage to the subcutaneous injection methodology other than you're just giving yourself smaller needles, less scar tissue. I mean, I guess that could be an argument to be made, because guys are using big needles and jamming them into their thigh or their shoulder for years on end. They end up with a bunch of scar tissue from using those large ass harpoon needles. Maybe that's an argument that could be made that you're giving yourself a break from that. But that's sort of my thoughts on it. Hey, look, if it works for you, if you're getting better estradiol conversion, if you feel better on it and you're willing to take shots every day, why the fuck not? Go for it. To me, I'm just too fucking lazy. I get tired of taking shots and I just want to take a shot like once or twice a week when I'm on cruise. All right, folks, that's all I got for you on this one. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for your support. I'll see you on the next episode. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.